Hello the internet and welcome back to my channel. Today on the bench we have the Macintosh Color Classic. This is episode 2, so we've taken a look at this computer on a previous episode. You find the link down below in the description. The computer was in a rough shape. We had to replace the capacitors on the motherboard as usual, fix some of the joints, and the analog board was completely dead. We recapped the analog board, we had some voltages coming out, and finally the computer came back to life. We checked the hard drive and it was dead, and we also checked the floppy drive, which was in horrendous shape. We fixed that one, and I took the hard drive out of my Macintosh SE as a short-term solution to test this computer. And I started installing the operating system. Everything seemed to be working totally fine, until towards the end the computer started misbehaving. It started crashing before or at the desktop, and I couldn't understand what was going on. Towards the end I realized that the computer was actually working totally fine with the floppy, but just before shooting the outro of the video, even with the floppy, it started misbehaving as well. So I decided to make a two-parts video because it was getting too long, and on this episode we need to understand what's wrong with this computer, what works and what doesn't. Now, first thing first, on this episode, we are gonna build a BlueSCSI. I haven't got one, and I'm not really sure whether this hard drive is working. I mean, it's an old Quantum infamous for failing. This is coming from my SE. It was working on my SE, but I don't use my SE every day. So I need something modern to see, whether this system is actually working or not. And the BlueSCSI, at least the PCB, is going to be manufactured by PCBWay, the sponsor of this video, and we're gonna put it together here on the video. And as I said in my previous video, I now have a second channel. So if you like this kind of things, take a look at the second channel, subscribe if you want. It's gonna be similar projects, just projects which I believe don't belong on the main channel. I still have to decide exactly what to do with that. So take a look and keep an eye, and hopefully there will be something that you might like. Enough me talking, it's time to continue diagnosing this Macintosh and see what's wrong with it. Since the previous video, I completed the analog board. Now the 3300 capacitors are the right size, so those were replaced. The optocouplers were replaced because they were in bad shape. They were working, but I don't think they were going to be reliable over time, so those are brand new. And I've also removed the rust from the metal work and also reattached all the shields at the bottom of the board. Now, I did test the analog board to make sure that the voltages were right, but I haven't really tested the computer in its entirety. So what I'm going to do today, got the floppy, and I'd like to boot on 753. First of all, to make sure that everything still works as before, and the other thing, I'd like to show you something if we get to the desktop. Okay, we got mains coming in, and let's turn it on. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, got high voltage, got the bong, and we should get the picture. Slowly but surely we got to the desktop, which is good. The machine is working, and well, on this occasion I managed to boot it up. Now, something I've noticed at the very end of the video last time, after the video was finalized, is this. During the last video, we did check how much RAM was being detected by the operating system, and it said 10 megabytes, which is the maximum this system can ever see. So that was totally fine. But meanwhile, I removed the expansion memory sticks from the computer because, when you have reliability issues, it's always a good idea to have the bare minimum, so you remove potential issues out of the equation. And now the system sees 2 megabytes. But this computer is supposed to have 4 megabytes and not 2 megabytes. I did check on the motherboard, those ICs, they're definitely supposed to be 4 megabytes in total, so we have a RAM problem. And hopefully this is all this computer needs. Once the RAM is fixed, hopefully everything else, including the hard drive and the floppy EMU maybe, will start behaving. My idea is that maybe those 2 extra megabytes the system can't recognize are still there, and they appear and disappear on the bus every now and then, corrupting the content of the data bus, of course. So before we think of anything else, the BlueSCSI, the hard drive, the floppy, or anything, we need to fix that RAM. That's a must. I can see that the motherboard is actually, not the motherboard, the connector of the motherboard is actually holding place held in place here by these two clips, and I hope I'm not breaking them, but I'd like to free it up so I can hopefully tilt the board and access the other side and do a few tests while the system is running. So let's try and do that. Alright, before we start poking on this board, let's have a look at how the memory is configured on this board. This is a 68030 processor. It has a 32-bit data bus, but the memory bus on this board is actually 16-bit. And these are the memory modules. We have 8 ICs. Each of these ICs is 512 kilobytes. So we have 4 megabytes of RAM, as we are expecting, and each one of these IC is 4 bits. So to cover the 16-bit RAM bus, we need at least 4 ICs. Now, because we have 8, that means that we have 2 banks of RAM. One is 4 ICs, the other bank is the other 4 ICs. This 16-bit RAM bus is going through these 245 buffer chips. A buffer chip is basically like a gatekeeper or a traffic light. It allows one bus or one device to talk to another. So it will set the direction of the data and tell the RAM, yes, now you can put your data on the bus, or hey RAM, we got data on the bus, this is for you. We have 2 ICs here because these 245 are only like 8 channels, 8 lines each. So to cover the 16-bit memory bus, we need 2 of them. Now, on the same memory bus, we have these 2 ICs. These are video RAM ICs. They are used for displaying the picture on screen, and these are 128 kilobytes each. But each one of these IC is 8-bit, and that's why we only have 2 to cover the 16-bit memory bus. So if we look at the schematics, the 2 banks of RAM share the same address lines and data lines. What's different between the 2 is the CAS signal. We have a CAS low and a CAS high, which is driving the 2 banks independently. So I think we have a couple of options here. Option number 1 is that one of these ICs here, the gatekeepers, the buffers for the main bus, is not working. At that point, half of the RAM bus is not working, and only half of the RAM is going to be accessible by the system. But I don't think that's the case for a number of reasons. Number 1, the video RAM is also sharing exactly the same bus. So if one of these ICs is not working, the system wouldn't be able to access half of the RAM, but also wouldn't be able to access half of the video RAM. Now, we only have 256 kilobytes of video RAM on the system, and the monitor here has a resolution of 512 by 384. It's an 8-bit picture in terms of number of colors, so that requires 192 kilobytes just to put a picture on screen. So whenever you have even the desktop, that requires 198 kilobytes of video RAM to display that picture, that image on the CRT. So if half of the video RAM wasn't accessible, I don't think the system wouldn't even turn on, wouldn't display a picture, because there's simply not enough video memory to store that picture that then eventually will reach the CRT. Also, in the previous video, we did check at some point how much RAM the system had. At that point, we still had the extended memory, these 2 sticks in the modules here, in the sockets here, and the system said we had 10 megabytes. Now, 10 megabytes is the absolute maximum for the Color Classic. The thing is, these are 8 megabytes, they're 4 megabytes each, and so in theory, we had 12 megabytes on the board. The system can't deal with 12, so it was saying 10. But instead of doing 4 on the board plus 6 on the extension, he was doing 2 on the board and 8 on the extension. So that meant the extension was working 100%. The system was able to access the extension, so these 2 RAM sticks, 100%. So that's telling me that the memory bus is working, because these memory sticks, they shared exactly the same RAM bus, and if half of the RAM bus was not visible, was not working, we wouldn't be able to see the whole amount of extended RAM. Another scenario would be that one of the CAS lines are not working, but once again, number 1, it would mean that half of everything is going to be missing, and also the video RAM is also sharing the same CAS line. So that would mean that if the CAS line is not working, we wouldn't be able to have a picture on screen. So I don't think that's the case. So unfortunately, I think we have a simple case of a faulty memory module. And it's going to be a bit complicated to identify which one is not working, unless like it's scorching hot or like stone cold, we can use the thermal camera and have a look. The thing is, the bus is used by everything, and most importantly, it's used by the video RAM. So whenever I have a picture on screen, the bus is going to be busy with video RAM. Now, half of the RAM is going to be not used, I guess. So hopefully that's going to be enough to show a difference between the working bank and the non-working bank. I would say let's turn this on with the motherboard in this position. Let's make sure that everything works. And we'll start poking with the oscilloscope, looking for the data lines and see whether we have anything out of the ordinary. All right, the Macintosh is working. I have the question mark on screen. I had a look at the schematics. Obviously, the banks are divided into two, like logically. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's start probing things and see if we can see something. This is an address line of one of the modules. And obviously, as I said, this has been used by the video RAM. So there's quite a lot of activity as well. And let's go to one module of a different bank. And I would say it's identical, so I can't really see a difference here. All the other address lines are looking more or less exactly the same. There's really nothing that catches my attention on either banks. They're all the same. Now let's have a look at the data lines of one of the banks. This is one of the data lines of one of the banks. It looks, I would say, okay. It's going up to 5 volts and we have random activity in the middle. Again, this is shared with the video RAM, so that could be anything, but it looks okay. And this is a data line from the other bank, same pin, and that doesn't look okay. I mean, we have most of the time the bus is at like 1.5 volts. It doesn't look okay. There's something that doesn't look right. We have some data in between, but between bursts of data, the line is going like at that weird voltage. That doesn't look right. Let's try another line. Yeah, it's exactly the same. So unless there's a reason for that, but I would never expect the bus to be like a 1.5 volts, 0, 5, and that's it. It can't be a 1.5. Now, the fact that all these data lines are like that, it's kind of weird though. This is the third data line, and it's exactly the same. And this is the fourth data line, and it looks exactly the same. So that's a bit weird. I would expect one data line to be bad, but all of 4 of one bank, that's weird. And the other bank looks totally fine. That is the data line of the other bank. Again, in between burst, it goes up to 5 volts, not 1.5. So we might have identified the bad bank. And there's nothing like out of the ordinary in terms of like scorching hot RAM. I think I want to try with my thermal camera. I might be able to feel something. There's not much difference, but maybe my thermal camera can tell me something else. Now, something else which is catching my attention is these two 245. As I said before, I don't really think the 245 is our problem. But if I'm checking these 245 here, on the left-hand side is the RAM bus, and on the right-hand side is the CPU bus. Now, say I'm checking my RAM bus, one of the pins, and I'm going to see exactly what I was seeing on the RAM module, because that's it, that's directly connected and it's shared with all the RAMs and the video RAM, and it's totally fine. And if I'm looking on the other side, which is going to be the CPU bus, I'm seeing something like this, just to show you that, yeah, we got lots of data, a very high frequency, and happy days. Now, if I'm checking the other one, obviously on the RAM side, I'm going to see exactly what I was seeing before, which is weird. But if I'm looking on the CPU side, I'm seeing this. It's just like, it's a lower peak voltage with something else happening. And now I'm thinking, rather than the RAM chip, could it be one of these 245, which is not like completely faulty, but is faulty enough for one bank not to be recognized, but the RAM sticks for whatever reason to work intermittently, and that's why we had all those issues. And the video RAM is working, but sometimes it glitches on the video as well, and the whole system becomes unstable because this 245 is basically destroying the data bus. It could also be one RAM module which is destroying everything, and obviously when the 245 is opening to the other side, is also corrupting, destroying the data bus from the CPU as well. I don't know, but this is quite interesting to see. Now, you know how much I love to play with the cold spray and hot air, so I think I'm gonna play with my cold spray and see if by any chance we see any difference on the RAM bus when I cool down the 245. Okay, no difference. Let's try with the memory modules. No, and not even hot air changed anything. So I would say before we start thinking of what to do, let's take a look with the thermal camera and see by any chance we have a better idea what's going on. Camera is out. This is my new top-down TS001. I've taken a better look at this camera in my previous video, the PlayStation 4 one. The link is below in the description. I do see something weird, that this I see here is a bit warmer than all the others. I don't think it's much warmer. So I'm not sure whether it should be taken into consideration. I'm not sure whether there's something at the back. I don't think so. But it's kind of weird that it looks warmer than all the others. The 245s look totally fine, and the video RAM looks totally fine, but that IC looks a bit warmer. That being said, if I'm looking at the data there, I think it's only 1 degree. Does it really matter? I'm not sure, to be honest. It's a bit weird. I admit it's a bit weird, but I don't think it really matters. But most importantly, I don't see a difference, as I was hoping to see like 4 modules warmer than the others, and that doesn't seem to be the case, unfortunately. Now, it's a bit difficult at this point to understand what to do, but the thing is, I haven't got spare memory RAM at the time being. I'll source some so we can start swapping it, but I think what I'd like to do right now is to swap the 245s between themselves. So put this one in this position and this one in this position, and see by any chance if the weird bus is moving with the 245 or is staying with the location. So if it stays with the 245, obviously it means we need another 245. If it stays in the same position, then I would say we definitely have, well, definitely, I hope we have a bad memory module, and at that point I'll start replacing them. Now with low melt solder, it's pretty easy to remove those ICs, so let's put the board under the microscope, swap them out, and we'll see what happens afterwards. The buffers are swapped, let's power on and let's check those data lines. And no, the weird data lines remained where they were before, so they didn't follow the 245. Again, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I would say the 245s are fine. And the next step is going to be to swap the RAM. And I'm going to, without any other clue, I think I'm going to swap these 4 modules here and hope that that is the bank that I'm looking for, the faulty bank. The replacement RAM has arrived. It's a 72-pin 4MB RAM stick. Now, it said on the advert that it's working, but I want to test it myself. I've got a 486 board, so I can test this by itself. I haven't tested this in a while, so I've got a memory stick in here and a video card. Let's turn it on, make sure it works, and then we'll test this one. Power on now. Didn't like it. Let's try and reset this RAM stick. Try again, 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, I think he likes it now. Yeah, and we got 32 megabytes. This is a 32 megabyte stick, so let's power it off. Swap the stick for the one that I want to use for the Macintosh, and let's test again. Power on now. Perfect. Well, that's not a definite test, but it definitely seems to be working. So we can start working on the Macintosh again. Before we start swapping ICs, I reviewed the footage, and I think I said a few inaccuracies, and real quick, I want to go through a few points and clarify a couple of things. The first thing is that at some point I said that maybe the weird bus that we would see when I was probing with the oscilloscope could be caused by one IC that maybe is crippling the whole bus. Well, that's impossible. One IC is 4 bits, so we could have 4 lines crippled, but not the whole bus. You would need all 4 ICs in order, bad ICs, in order to have that kind of effect on the whole bus. So I would say that that is unlikely. The second point is that weird bust that we would see on the scope on some of the ICs. Now, I've checked again those lines with the computer running on the desktop, and I don't think we have a problem here. I think I was zoomed in too much, and when you start looking too close at the bus, sometimes buses can be weird. But if I zoom out a bit, everything, to be honest, looks totally fine. And even if I zoom in, that kind of weird bus with the floating line in the middle, it can be seen everywhere on basically every IC, on both banks. So I don't really think that we have a problem there. And even if we had it, I don't think it's pointing at a specific IC or a specific bank. So that, unfortunately, is removing the only clue that I had in trying identifying which one of the ICs I wanted to replace first. And speaking of that, I've been looking at those diagrams, at those schematics, and I think I was incorrect when I said that these 4 ICs are, say, bank 0, and the next 4 ICs are bank 1. And I kept looking at the schematics, and there was something I couldn't understand. And I think the reason is because I think I found a typo in the schematics. As I said, the bus is 16 bits, and these ICs are 4 bits each, so we need 4 of these ICs to cover the whole bus, and we have 2 banks of ICs which are sharing the data lines, which means that each one of these IC is sharing data lines with another IC from a different bank. Now, the address lines are the same for all these ICs, so we need some kind of logic mechanism to use one bank and not the other. So tell one bank it's your time to use the bus, or the other bank to say it's your time to use the bus. Now, there is an output enabled pin on these ICs, but I think it's shared with all these ICs. So I was struggling a bit to understand what is the behind the scene logic that would allow the system to select one bank rather than the other. Now, the logic is the CAS and RAS lines, and I can see these are coming from this IC here, U16, which I guess also contains the memory management IC or logic, and we have 2 RAS lines and 2 CAS lines. The CAS lines are split between low and high. Now, if I'm looking at the schematics and I'm looking at the onboard RAM, the schematics are basically telling me that all these chips are using the same RAS, which is RAS A, and are also using the same CAS B. And that didn't make any sense, because that meant that whenever one bank was selected, the other one was selected as well. That doesn't work. They're going to use the same data lines at the same time. They're going to clash. It's not going to work. So I started buzzing the lines with my multimeter, and at some point I realized that when the schematics say the sum of these IC, one bank on these IC, is connected to pins 111 and 103, which is CAS B, they're actually connected to pins 99 and 81, which is CAS A. So that makes sense. One bank is CAS A, one bank is CAS B. But it took me a while to realize that there's a typo in the schematics. So if I'm not mistaken, the 2 banks are divided into chips 26, 23, 19, and 13, and 25, 24, 20, 14. Which is weird, because they're not symmetric on the board. It doesn't make much sense to me, but this is my conclusion. I might be mistaken. Leave a comment if you think that I'm making a mistake here. But this is what I think the banks are divided on the board. So I was looking for clues, and I think I might have found one. Let me turn on this Macintosh, let me get on the desktop, and I'll show you something. Alright, I've reached the desktop, the computer is idle right now. Let's scope the CAS line of the IC number 13, which is CAS B. You can see there is quite a lot of activity, so that's suggesting that the RAM is being used, and there's lots of stuff going on here. Now let's go and check CAS A, which is IC14, it's the adjacent IC. There you go. Well, that doesn't seem as busy as the other one, and this one is a big clue. I think this is telling me that CAS A is not working. Hopefully not because CAS A is not working, but because there's a RAM problem. So what I want to do, I want to focus my attention on the bank which is connected to CAS A. Now, if I'm not mistaken, CAS A is connected to 14, 20, 24 and 25. I put a green dot on the ICs driven by CAS A, and guess what? We have this IC, which under the thermal camera was mildly warmer. I don't know whether that is a big clue, but I think I'm gonna try and replace that IC first, and if that doesn't work, then we'll move and replace one at a time the whole bank connected to CAS A. Finger crossed, we don't have a logic problem. First module is replaced, let's power up and let's see how much RAM the Macintosh is seeing now. Yes! 4 megabytes! Fantastic! So, all the diagnostic and everything, it actually was kind of useful because I replaced one IC and now I got 4 megabytes back on this Color Classic. Great! Fantastic! It's time to build the BlueSCSI, and as you can see from the PCBs, I went for the full process. These are not pre-populated, and I'm going to install the whole set of components, SMD components of them, because I thought if I get the pre-populated ones, it's kind of easy. Just install the Raspberry Pi, you flash it, DB25 connector, and you plug it in, and it works. Kind of boring, so I wanted to experience the whole process. Now it's gonna take some time to build these PCBs, so rather than showing you a few seconds and then coming up with a working BlueSCSI out of nowhere, I made a whole dedicated video where I'm showing you the whole building process of the BlueSCSI, including some troubleshooting at the end, because the things didn't go as I wanted, and believe it or not, it wasn't because of the SMD installation. So go and take a look. On the same video, I'm also showing you this. It's my new hot plate, I think it's called. It's a mini preheater, and we're gonna take a look and we're gonna mod it. Because this is a mains powered unit. It comes from AliExpress, and as usually happens with these things, it was a bit too dangerous for my taste. So I did a little modification, and if you are interested in that, it's on the second channel on the same video where I'm building the BlueSCSI. As I said in the intro, the PCBs were manufactured by PCBWay, and it's incredibly easy to have some of these delivered at your place. You just need the Gerber file of the project of your choice. In the case of the BlueSCSI, all the Gerber files are on the project page. You just need to select which one of the versions you want. This is the external DB25 version. You also have a desktop version. I can't remember the third version, what kind of version it is, but you just download the Gerber file, upload it on PCBWay.com, choose the color of your board if you want. It's BlueSCSI, so I guess it has to be blue. If it was yellow SCSI, it would be yellow. Choose a postal service, and the PCBs are going to be delivered at your place. I'm sure one day I'm going to use some of the other services that PCBWay can offer, like 3D printing and metal sheet fabrication. I have something in mind, it might happen at some point. For now, take a look at PCBWay.com, the link is also down below in the description, and let me thank PCBWay for sponsoring my videos. They help make these videos possible. Now, we have a working BlueSCSI. Let's go ahead and let's test it on this Macintosh. BlueSCSI is plugged in, let's power up and see what happens. And yes, it's booting into 753, fantastic, it's working. And no, I still have errors, so this Mac It's still unhappy, but now it's getting complicated to understand what's wrong with it. And obviously now we have the hard drive out of the equation. There is definitely something wrong with the system, and I don't know what it is. And a further reboot, we have a completely different error. So yes, there's definitely something wrong with the system. I'm thinking it could still be RAM. It could be that the module I replaced was completely broken and it was preventing the bank from working, but there is still something which is preventing the system from working reliably. So one option, of course, is to replace the whole set of RAM. One thing I want to try now is to boot the system from the floppy, because I tried that earlier on and it was working. So I'm just thinking whether this could be a SCSI problem. Let me test again from the floppy, because last time it was still not working even from the floppy. If it's reliable from the floppy, but it refuses to start from SCSI, then maybe we have a SCSI controller issue. And no, the system is still having trouble even via floppy. So clearly it doesn't seem to be a SCSI issue, even though obviously the SCSI IC, it's on the bus. And, everything is possible. It could still be anything. I can tell you that I have tested several times with the floppy. It always worked. This is the first time that it hasn't worked. So it looks like the system has a problem, some sort of a problem. The first thing I'd like to try now is a RAM test, because there's no point in moving forward if I'm not 100% sure, at least a bit more sure, that the RAM is working. So let me find some sort of RAM test software and see if we can actually run it on this computer. Alright, here we get the MacTest Pro emergency disk, the one for System 7. Now, since the previous segment, for you it's been like a few seconds, for me it's been about 8 hours. Yes, it's taken absolutely forever to make this. The image of this, at least I couldn't find it online. I could find the version for System 6, but not the one for System 7. And in order to make the System 7, you actually have to run MacTest Pro. Now, I have many Macintoshes around the house, they're not really being used, and none of them is running something like a bridge operating system like System 9. Everything is running System 10. So after a few hours tinkering with Windows trying to make this disk, I decided, okay, let's go with an actual Macintosh. But running these things, which are designed for System 7 on a System 10 is not great. You need to run the emulation of System 9, which is not perfect. Anyways, eventually I ended up with the bridge system, and it's taken me absolutely forever. I'm not a Macintosh person, so finding all those 1,000 different versions of the operating system, of the software, stuff it and toast, and that's working on this version, that's working on the 68K, that's working on PowerPC, that's working on Intel, this is only System 8, this is only System 9. It was a nightmare for me. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably know more than I do about these machines. But in the end, I managed to get this. So let's power up, let's boot from these, and hopefully we can run a memory test. No, even the diagnostic is failing. It's failing while loading the operating system. So that's a bit like a catch-22 situation. I have a problem on the system, but the system is not stable enough to run the diagnostic software, which might help me finding out what's the problem with the system. Now, during those 8 hours of passion when I was trying to make this floppy, I also managed to make this Apple Personal Diagnostic emergency disk. So let's try with this one and see what happens. Well, I think it's frozen, or anyways, it stopped and it's not doing anything. So this is not starting either. What puzzles me is that every time you have a different error or a different behavior, I don't know, but obviously, unfortunately, it looks like I'm not able to run a RAM test. Alright, I've managed to boot the system with the disk tool 1 of 753, but I've managed to squeeze on the same floppy the MacTest Pro emergency testing software. So let's try and run it and see if we can run some tests. And the system has frozen, and I can tell you that I tried this again and I had different error messages. So no, the system is too unstable, too unreliable to do anything. So unfortunately, I cannot have any help from a diagnostic software. Alright, plot twist. Just before giving up, I decided to do something. I thought, you never know, let me try and replace the keyboard and the mouse. Because those came with the Macintosh. Now, could the mouse and the keyboard cause problems? I don't know, but I have my own mouse and my own keyboard. Let's try, it will just fail. And surprisingly, it actually ran. And surprisingly, it actually passed the mid-speed RAM test, like the extended, whatever that's called. So this is like, what is this? I mean, is this actually working now? Is it just a coincidence that it's working? Before I say anything, let me run the very long RAM test. It will take a while. Might run it several times if it keeps running, if it keeps passing. And then we'll move from there, because I wasn't expecting this. The VRAM test passed, and after that the main memory test started. It was very, very slow, but unfortunately after a few hours it got stuck at 11%. It's been at 11% for a couple of hours, so unfortunately the system has frozen again. Now, did it freeze because there was a RAM problem, or did it freeze because something is wrong somewhere else which froze the whole system? We don't know, but let's go ahead and replace the RAM. I restarted the Mac after the crash, and I got this. I don't know what that is, but I suppose it's a corrupted version of the startup bong. Could the stress of the memory test have broken another RAM IC? Well, it's difficult to know at this stage, and the behavior keeps changing, which does not help. So I went ahead and replaced the next RAM IC starting from one end of the PCB. Surprisingly, the system powered up again after the replacement. Was that module really faulty, or is there a broken trace of VIA somewhere and I just temporarily fixed it by handling the board? Mind you, it could very much be something intermittently broken inside an IC and the mechanical stress is changing its behavior. It could also be the heat applied on the RAM pads, which is affecting something nearby. It's so hard to say. Anyways, I was able to boot into the OS and run a MacTest Pro. I ran a quick RAM test which passed, so I went ahead and ran the long RAM test. The RAM test lasted 7 hours, but it completed and it passed. Amazing, though at some point I could see some yellow halo around some text on the screen. I thought it was nothing, and at the end of the test I was somewhere else. I heard the floppy spinning, so I guess at the end of the procedure it just loads another screen or something, but then it didn't do anything. So I reached out to the computer and I moved the mouse, and the mouse started drawing yellow on screen, and then it crashed. Yes, so it was crashed again, and I hoped it was just, I don't know, something, and just, nothing to worry about. I restarted the Mac, and... Yes, it's broken again. Now we have the go to the Apple Store and buy another Mac tune, which means there's a hardware failure detected, and we would need something called, I think it's called a tech step, to connect to the computer and come out with an actual error message that tells you exactly what's going on. Anyways, I kept rebooting it, I kept playing with the motherboard a little bit. At some point, it started booting, but with no video, so we had a gray screen, but I could hear the floppy spinning and doing something and reading data, and that's what it's doing now. So I guess it's getting into the operating system, but there is a gray screen on the monitor. So what to do at this stage? Do we have another bad RAM module? I mean, it's a possibility. 7 hours of stress test might have broken another one, but I think before I go ahead and replace the whole RAM, I think I want to put this thing under the microscope and inspect all the joints and reflow everything I find, including these IC and these ICs. On old computers, motherboards, video cards, I always find these legs either detached or almost detached. So it's gonna take a while, but I think I want to go ahead and reflow everything, because every time I touch the board, it kind of changed behavior. Though yesterday I tried flexing it and poking it, and it wouldn't change. I don't know. I'll have to try this, and if that doesn't work, we'll go ahead and replace the whole set of RAM. But yeah, this is getting a bit frustrating. I checked most of the legs of the ICs on the board. None seemed to be detached, but I noticed quite a few corroded pads, so I went ahead and reflowed everything. That took some time, as you can imagine. Ideally, I'd like to remove those ICs, clean the pads, check for broken traces, and solder them back. Unfortunately, some of the ICs show corrosion going inside the chip itself, which is never a good thing. After reflowing the CPU and the ASIC IC, I also reflowed the IC responsible for RGB generation, since we don't have a picture anymore. I was optimistic this would change the behavior of the Mac, but I was mistaken. No change whatsoever. So I went ahead and replaced all the RAM, as I should have probably done long ago. Surprisingly, this time I had no improvement. Still the same grey screen with either the death tune or a system which seems to be loading the OS, but without a picture. In fact, I'm actually confident that the Mac is loading the OS, as once the floppy stopped making noise, I pressed the power button on the keyboard, and that resulted in a chime and more drive activity, confirming that the OS was actually running. But when I tried to capture that behavior on camera, well, it didn't do that, suggesting that the OS had frozen. So it seems that this Mac is more broken than before. It's still unstable, but now we've lost the picture. Yet, it was able to pass 7 hours of RAM test. Well, I guess this is gonna be a 3-part episode. We still have lots to do, and this video is getting a bit too long, so I guess we'll continue on part 3. Now, I'm getting a bit pessimistic on whether I can fix this logic board or not, but I can anticipate that someone from the Tinker Different community has agreed to lend me a TechStep, the official Apple tool that was used back in the days to diagnose these boards. I'm not holding my breath though. The TechStep might just be giving me a generic error message, but who knows, maybe it's gonna tell me exactly what's wrong with this board, and it might help me fixing it. On top of that, I have a few ideas of my own, and we're gonna explore all those ideas on the next episode. Let me send a big thank you to the Tinker Different community on Discord. They were really amazing. They helped me a lot, especially when I was trying to make that diagnostic floppy and I had to deal with OS 7, OS 8, OS 9, OS 10 and all that 1,000 different variables involved. Thank you very much. It's been fun, but I do appreciate your help and your time. A big thanks to all my patrons who are supporting my work. Their names is scrolling now on the screen. If you also want to join me on Patreon, there is also a free tier, so you have no excuses. If you don't want to join me on Patreon, well, you can buy me a coffee. The link is down below in the description. If you don't want to buy me a coffee, well, just watching this video and maybe, liking it, leaving a comment and maybe subscribing, that's enough for me. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, as usual, I'd appreciate a thumb up down below, and also consider subscribing to this channel and my second channel if you like this kind of things. For now, thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon for the next episode for this Color Classic, and for now, have a great day. Thank you very much and goodbye. Bye bye.